to Shine Your Light Conversations, where we meet ordinary women being extraordinary. These are women who are courageous in living their truth. These are women who, in shining their light, empower themselves and inspire others. I'm your host, Kate Watkinson. A very warm welcome to you, and a very warm welcome to our beautiful guest today, the dynamic people engager, the very effervescent Janelle Fletcher. Welcome, Janelle.
Hi, Kate. I love that word effervescent for sure. Never describe myself like that, but totally that is me.
Well, having met you and spoken with you several times, I definitely know that you are effervescent, Janelle. That is exactly how I would describe you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fun, alive, bubbly, sparkling.
Totally. All of that. Hasn't always been that way.
Oh, okay. Well, we might even start right there. so how does one move from not having been like that to becoming an effervescent person?
Look, it's been a long life story, really. I just had many years as a teenager. I remember not being in a good way and certainly not shining. I was very shy, actually, and not very well spoken, and also quite depressed, to be honest, dealing with some eating issues following the grief of my grandmother. So it hasn't always come naturally, but I know as a maturing woman, something's changed for me. And I think it's actually not just a necessity, but actually spirit working with me, let's call it that, that brings out the life of me, because there's no other option to go back into that dark space, really, where I was.
Mm. Do you feel, Janelle, like I know from my personal experience that what I probably used to consider a weakness was my high sensitivity and how deeply I felt the world and so many things like that. I used to really consider that made my life so difficult, whereas now I consider are really the gifts that have propelled me on this path so much. Do you feel that can be how it is sometimes for yourself and for others?
Absolutely. I mean, I shine really in my pastoral care. So anything where I'm caring deeply for people is where I absolutely show my effervescence, if we go back to that word. Funny enough, in my Wild Woman group the other night, which we were facilitating, we looked back at aspects of our life, and it was interesting because I went back to the age of 6, actually, where I was getting my tonsils out in this hospital, and it took me through a series of times where I've spent time with the hospital system and working in the hospital system. And I realized through some of those very unattended to moments, or actually in one case quite abusive moment in the hospital, that is where I learned my really deep caring of people, because there's no way I will not attend to people well. There is no way. And I think that has really helped me hone my pastoral care for sure, my deep caring of people, my deep listening of people. So I actually see that as a blessing, because that has absolutely made me into the carer that I am. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Janelle, could you explain to us, you describe yourself as a dynamic people engager. What does that actually mean?
Well, I don't care what job I do in life, it is always based around people. So whether it's a sales job, working in a flipping post office, sending out mail, whatever, whether it's I'm teaching or whatever, it's always about people, absolutely about people, and not so much about the job itself, so much as my engagement with the people. Dynamic, what does that mean? It means that it's a skill actually I learned as an occupational therapy student, and the subject we had was called conscious use of self. So how do we use ourselves consciously in the way we talk, in our tone, in our volume, in our listening of people, even in our posture, in our way, in our positioning with a person. So the dynamics, the changing of that, and the seeing of how I can use myself the best to get the best out of somebody else. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And
so it's not a static thing. It's like if I was in a job, for example, it's not about addressing that person the same way as I addressed the last person. It's about really honing and noticing that person to their deep core. How do they use language? How do they relate to the person next to them? What are they really saying behind the words that they're saying? And then attending and engaging with that. Yeah, because one of my deepest desires and skills is actually really, really seeing a person.
And do you know I think that's possibly the greatest gift you could give anybody. I've recently been researching the topic of kindness for a podcast that I'm being interviewed for. And after, I think I read about 10 books on kindness. And I mean, it's a word that's bandied around a lot. And but I wonder if people actually at their core really know what it is to be kind. And after scrolling through so much research and everything, the fundamental truth that came out of that is the greatest gift of kindness is to be truly deeply present with somebody, to see them, to hear them, to be completely present, which is actually very rare in our modern life.
Absolutely.
So everything you're saying is a true testament to being a kind person, to offering that presence and that awareness and that ability to see and hear.
Yeah, and I think, Kate, that comes from also past experiences in my own, particularly family life, but also in my social life, where I actually have been seen or felt incredibly visible. And one of the threads of my own life is a very strong one, and it has been about feeling invisible. If someone saw me, they go, "Oh, you're not visible, you're out there, you're effervescent, you're up there doing stuff on stage, you're out there writing books, you're coaching, you're healing, you're doing this and that." And they see that, but deep within my core has been a thread. And I know many of your listeners listening may relate to this, where they don't feel seen. They actually feel invisible because there's not necessarily any validation coming back, or not even being noticed at all, really.
And I can really relate to that too, being somebody, like I touched on earlier, that's highly sensitive and very aware of energy and a lot of qualities that, well, they're becoming more acceptable now, but certainly as a child, like I felt like I was completely from another planet that landed in this place and just thought, what on earth? Like I didn't think anybody truly saw me for who I was at that time, you know. So yeah, and to learn to step into who you truly are, and as you do that, you start to connect with your tribe, and more you truly see people, they truly see you, and yeah, there's magic there.
There is magic. There's magic, and it's not just being seen. What I noticed, for example, again back to our Wild Women group, we're a group of gorgeous women who allow each other to be seen, not just in the social media bubble of all things amazing, but actually seen in total vulnerability. And what I've appreciated about finding my tribe in Wanaka, I've been here 5 years, it took me about 4 years to find my tribe, and now I'm blessed to have them, but we allow each other to be absolutely real and honest, so much so that it can be frightening sometimes, you know, well, almost frightening because it's so unfamiliar. But I am so grateful to this group of women where I can totally be in the heights or totally in the depths, and they will accept me for that. And actually honor me for that, because that is such realness that is so lacking in our society.
Absolutely. And I'm very strong about that with Thrive in Light, my business, and that thriving in light to me is not about being extrovertedly happy and you know, all the time. It's actually about living authentically, aligned with your deepest truth, being who you really are, and that is the ebbs and flows, that is the ups and downs and the seasonal. You know, women are seasonal, they're cyclical, there's a fluidity. It's not a constant progression up. It's
not at all. No, it's interesting you say that too. I've got my book here, which I know you're familiar with or at least heard about. It's called Dancing in Our Own Full Mood Light, the ebb and flow of being fully woman. And I know for me, it was very much about reflecting to myself first and foremost, but to other women, to go, the ebbs are great, the flows are great. You know, whatever that is totally okay. And so do you want to hear about this book? I don't know if you know too much about it. But,
yes, please, we do. We need to know
about
this book.
Worth mentioning. This is a book, you talked about cycles. So this book let's call it, got channeled to me. Let's call it that. Yes, I wrote it, but it was mostly channeled. A few years back, I was a very, very busy mother of many, 6 in fact, and I had very, very little time to myself, but I was also very depleted. I was absolutely, I wouldn't call it burnout, but nigh on burnout. And I had the opportunity to go online for a month with this beautiful menstrual maven, she called herself, in England. And I loved her when I first saw her online. I just sort of resonated with her. Anyway, she offered this opportunity to write, and it didn't mean writing a book necessarily, but it was more offering the opportunity to actually be still. And how many of us women actually get still in our busy lives? And but it's something I've learned over time to do, and I appreciate it. Anyway, what happened is over the cycle of the moon phases, just over that 28 well to 30 days, let's call it, I sat in the wee hours of the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, which wasn't really my time, but just sat with a question that she posed each day, and so sat there and outpoured poetry essentially, and I didn't edit it, or I just noticed what was coming and let it, go into my computer essentially, but outpoured all these stories really, and memories, and deep, often deep wounds actually. But also some highs of my life to date. So it ended up being a poetry book, this one. And like I say, it wasn't going to be a book, but I just noticed this wasn't just for me, it was actually for other women too, who were in that way of being incredibly busy, overstretched, tired, and also, in that place of, feeling, who am I? And all of this giving to others. So that's really what it's about. And so it's a series of poetry, but I decided that I would create out of that an opportunity for women to journal. So after each entry of poetry, there are 3 reflection questions. So that idea of the moon reflecting, and for women to actually take that time for themselves to, flick through the book and see something appropriate for the day, and reflect on themselves and their own lives, and also to see their flippant amazingness, to be honest. That's probably what it's about.
Would you be willing to share a poem, Janelle?
Of course I would. I'd have to just flick through. Shall I just flick through?
Yes, flick through at random.
There are numbers. Why don't I just go to where I've got a card in there, just a moment. Let's have a look. It's day 28, so we're nigh on through the cycle. 1 or 2 here. I'll see whether I read it in its entirety, because I don't want it to take the whole time we're talking, but let's see. This one's called The Perfect Bloom. And my memory of this, and I love it because I get to read my own book and reread things and see where I'm at myself. This is about my appreciation of many women in my lives, mostly writers and authors and coaches, who have supported me on my journey through a lot of difficult womanly life transitions. Some of those transitions were my eating issues, fertility, losing some babies. I've had a life, taken on a family of 3 young girls after their mother was killed, dealt with all that sort of stuff, and birthed some children. I've been through some stuff, a breakup as well. So essentially this poem is around the women who have, or some women who have helped me lead my life better. Let's see what it's got for us both, actually. I'll be interested to see what springs to your mind and springs to some of your listeners' minds as to who has been, important in their garden of life. The perfect bloom. No rose is the same, even though she may resemble other roses who share her bush. Her petals are in perfect order, different from the others. Her thorns are uniquely hers. Oh, I love that. She buds and blooms in her own divine timing, and her scent wafts in the proportions and timing that make her the perfect rose. that could be amazing in itself when we reflect on our absolute uniqueness and individualism. Is amazing and perfect. Which other roses do I admire? See in their fullest beauty, soak in their scent and pick to enjoy and put in my favorite vase, or give as a beautiful gift to a friend. And then I've got a series of little verses that describe some of those women. Christiana Northrup, a woman of immense knowledge, medical and energetic, helping women to reconnect to their woman's bodies, woman's wisdom. Lisa Lister, the menstrual maven whose words sing to my soul and whose subject makes total sense and riffs in my veins and lights the path for women to finally be woman, messy and all. Anita Johnston, the storyteller who sinks us into our unconscious minds to eat in the light of the moon, healing our eating wounds and acknowledging the intuitive, feminine inner voice that wants to be unsilenced. Rawr. Maya Angelou, phenomenal woman with joy in her feet, poetess, activist, word priestess, whose words, powerful and honest, have inspired millions to become uncaged and sing again. Mother Teresa, role modeled love in action, reminding us that what we are doing is just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean would be less because of that missing drop. I don't know about you, but I'm getting goosebumps as I read this. Her simple words and actions she lived by and made a profound difference in the lives of many. Oriah Mountain Dreamer has made an invitation to millions to reach into their souls and listen to their inner landscape, to dance, to take on the call, and to live fully. Dawna Markova, who will not die an unlived life, that was the name of her book, reminds me to feel the wind in my hair, the whispers of my heart, the awakenings of my soul, and to live divided no more. Totally relevant for me at the moment when I'm straddling two things and going, which direction am I going in? People might relate to that. The last verse, this collective of women and other phenomenal women who have graced my path have all used their voices, their words, their hearts to be in their truth, their power, themselves. Beautiful roses, all unique, sharing the same garden. What was it that you heard in that, Kate?
Well,
Yourself?
Well, there's a few things that come to mind. I have recently just finished one of Lisa Lister's books, and I dearly love her. I love that she brings a sassiness and a realness and a spunk to being a woman. You know, it's edgy and it's raw and she calls it a bloody mess, which is awesome, you know.
Oh, she talks periods, she talks menstruation, she talks all things.
It's really,
talks the womb.
It really, really speaks to me. And another thought I had was around, I've done some work with Rebecca Campbell, and she is very, very connected to the rose. So she's actually just released a rose oracle deck, and on the symbolism of the rose and how it can, how the roses can speak to us and how we are reflected in a rose. So And the other thought that came to me was, I often offer this exercise to women where they consider who they really respect, whether it's somebody in their immediate circle that they interact with regularly, or whether it's somebody, you know, famous, and really dive deep into the qualities they admire, and then sit with the possibility of seeing those qualities in themselves. Absolutely. You know, so something in all of those women that you wrote about in your poetry, Janelle, you have in yourself those qualities. Yeah, exactly. Just like a mirror. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I just was thinking about there too is, you know, how do we, you know, women are great at comparing themselves to each other, you know, not enough to this, to that, you know, not enough of this, not enough of that.
rather than going, hey, this is who I am. And I've got some roses in my garden here, actually. What's a beautiful rose? Is it the big one? Is it the small one? Is it the bud? Is it the one that's just fallen down on the ground? They're all roses. All at different stages of life, and nothing or no one is better. We just share the garden and do our best to be the best we can be on the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing where as women we can start to hold space for other women and rise up together, rather than having that need to compare or to, I need to be more of this or less of this compared to that person, but to actually celebrate our uniqueness within the garden, within the landscape of all the other roses, so we can all bloom. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and not clone ourselves on each other. And I think, these days, I think social media has a lot to answer for, in the sense of we see people doing their social media savvy, whatever, image of themselves in their lives, but it's so untrue of them on the whole.
So Janelle, in terms of your sacred work in the world, I know that you are a celebrant. I was at a wedding that you led recently, and
fabulous.
Also write, and there's all sorts of strings to your bow. You are a speaker as well and a coach. So you touched on earlier that the common gift there for you is people. So what are the skills and what are the threads, and what do you love about those aspects of the work that you do with the work in the world?
Yeah, so you're right. So I am a wedding celebrant. I have done other ceremonies. So recently I did a blessing way ceremony, for example, for a beautiful pregnant woman just about to give birth. And how special was that? So really sacred circle stuff. Certainly some weddings, which is where I met you, of course. Writing is one of my key things. Obviously that book there, and a couple of others, and one on the burner at the moment, so that's amazing. And advocacy. I've always been a really strong advocate, not necessarily as a job, but that's a real thread of mine. So when I sit just now and think about what those threads are, there's something very much about being of bold voice. There's definitely that. My personal life has also required me to be the bold voice, but what comes with that often is the criticism or the misunderstanding, or being seen in a negative light, because sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. So I am a truth bearer, and I do choose my words mindfully, carefully, consciously. And sometimes that truth hurts. So that's an interesting thread of my life for sure. Pastoral care, we've touched on that a little bit, is definitely a thread that comes through. I'm really interested always in my event work. Whenever I was emceeing, it was typically around supporting a charity or a social cause. So that just fills my boots. I just absolutely love it. So, for example, the most recent one I did was here in Wanaka, where I supported a young Finnish woman who was running the length of New Zealand, 50 days of 50 kilometres per day. It was an amazing feat, let's call it, with blistery feet. But, it wasn't because she was doing that amazing physical challenge. It was because of her cause and her message. So a thread of mine is really helping women find their truth, speak their truth, articulate their message, have the courage to get it out there. And her particular message was around interpersonal violence, so her own experience of domestic violence. And so it was really about the awareness and the education aspect of her physical marathon that I really wanted to be behind. So that was just one example. Other examples have been, an organisation that supported young teenage women who had birth babies, who were also, the women also suffering from depression or really difficult, life-threatening, times in their lives. So I absolutely love that. So a thread, I guess, just thinking of even those two of many examples, is really the hard stuff in life, to be honest. The rites of passage and the life transitions and the life changes and the life, let's call them volcanoes, that can happen in our lives. that really rock a person's world, and particularly in my case, I love working with women particularly. What are these things that happen in life that totally rock their world, which they maybe didn't expect to happen, and to use that that shitey time, let's call it, to grieve, because grief is such an essential part of dealing with that change. And I sit very comfortably with women through their grief. Love it, in fact. How I love grief. I sit comfortably, but it's about allowing that time for grief, but also seeing that as their springboard to absolutely be the powerful messenger of that in a social sort of impacting humanitarian way. And I'm getting more and more clear on that, Kate, even over the last couple of months for myself, that's where I want to be heading myself, in terms of really helping them transform that heartache, that suffering, her story, I call it, rather than history, her story, into a humanity shift. Because now is the time for us to be doing it. We've just given such opportunity, especially in these last 2 years where this whole COVID palaver has been going on. I know many of us are reevaluating life and just going, hey, time is of the essence here. We need to be more urgent and fiercer. And I think that's the feminine rising. It's our fierce rising as women to go, hey, this is not okay, or hey, I can be part of this change in the world that I want to see. I feel like a preacher. But that's just evolving out of me as I speak, because I think this is where you and I and many other women are being absolutely summoned. I don't even want to be called called, because called feels a bit gentle. We're being summoned to, at this moment in history, to be actually be heard and be seen, sure, but more to be, hey, what's our part in changing something in humanity for the better, for everybody? And how can we collectively, we're talking the perfect garden, how can we collectively and collaboratively with other women, with other people, with men and women, but in our case, women, make this happen?
Yes. And
yes.
I feel like I've always felt very aligned with the work I do, but in the last few months, with this situation we've had in New Zealand with COVID and everything, that has moved to a point of absolute resoluteness. Like there's it is such a definitive, it feels to me like there's a definitive fire in me that this is so important to live the truth, to really fan that flame of fire in women, to grow together, to move from surviving to thriving. And it's essential. It's, I look around at a world that in many ways is so broken, but within that brokenness, I see the incredible potential to change and to evolve and to flourish. And it's interesting. I listened to a podcast recently that really encouraged a reframe for me. The whole message of that was moving from a spirituality that had been more I focused to one that was more we focused. So yes, it's about owning your own, sitting in your own discomfort and doing your own personal growth, but also going beyond that to community, to tribe, to planetary, to a much vaster way of healing the whole. Yeah,
absolutely. But what was just coming out of me, you said something about the spiritual thing, and I just diverted for a moment in my head. Spirituality, I think, at this moment for me anyway, and probably always, but is often seen as sort of love, light, and all things bright and flossy and amazing. I think at this moment with the feminine rising, that there's a feistiness and a fierceness and a fervency. Oh, I like those F's. I should write this down. That it's not love, light, and all things bright. It's actually down to earth, some hard slog in there. It's not all bright and glossy spirituality. It's actually, like you say, being the truth and being the truth and role modeling that truth, actually there's often a lot of opposition to that. Yeah. For example, I recently, through the mandates, lost my role in tourism here in Wanaka. And I, of course, was very saddened by that, because I loved that role and I excelled in that role, you know, having people have good times out there for sure, and that people engagement. But, you know, the case may be, I was asked, or, you know, with my decision around non-vaccination, that just meant in that moment that they no longer wanted me there. But in the meantime, my role modeling of how I've chosen to live life out of that dismissal is really challenging for these people, because it's really challenging their own values and challenging their own respect or disrespect, case may be. So I think at the moment, spirituality, it takes some guts.
No, I completely agree with you.
It takes big guts to be in our truth and to be so strongly aligned with it. You're a very values-driven person, and doesn't it take such guts to continue to align with that, no matter how shaky that looks, no matter whether we know what's about to happen tomorrow, or we have to go into complete trust, not knowing, you know. Whether we lose our jobs and have no idea where the money's coming from. Well, actually, the trust factor and the commitment to that value, to aligning with that value, is not always easy work.
No, I agree. In fact, it can be very messy and very uncomfortable. But I know from a personal point of view that it almost is for me now that there's not a choice. Of course there is a choice, but when I am aligned with my truth, it feels there is a complete knowing and faith within me that it is right. And I also know that when I act from that place, that the universe provides for me, that even though it can be messy and it can be really, really often socially challenging, the universe has absolutely got my back. And the more I keep aligned with that truth and purity, ultimately the greater the blessings are going to be, and the more I am living a life that is true, that is authentic. And I think the saddest part for me would be to not align with that. Like I would sooner be in moments of those incredible discomforts in alignment with my soul than doing something that seemed easier that was in complete misalignment with my soul.
The soul to the devil, I call it. You know, sell yourself out. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that some of that is happening for people, and it can be, to see somebody really in their truth is almost a two-pronged aspect of that, where it is really encouraging for some people, and for others it's so encouraging it's almost scary. Like how do I take that step? Well, it's all right for them, but how do I ever step into that? And that is such a big part of what I would love to do in my work, is to encourage all women to step into that. Like even if it's just dipping your toe in the first time, like be willing to get uncomfortable to ultimately get more and more comfortable with who you are.
Exactly. You know, the question that just came to my mind now, and we can explore this for each other, but also for your listeners, you know, if I was to ask a question to your listeners today, what's coming through intuitively is this, you know, what would I dare to do now? Actually, I'd love if your listeners could write that question down and actually sit in a still space today, not tomorrow, today, and really super honestly answer that question. And there's no prize for how big or small that seems for that woman, because every different action is significant enough. And what I'm getting as I'm just about to write my next book, The Humble Heroine, that small thing that I dare to do might be as simple and as difficult as a life-changing phone call. It might be as simple or as difficult as creating a flippant global movement. Do you know what I mean? Neither of those is better than the other. But I think the question that I'm coming to right at this moment, and for your listeners perhaps too, is, what would I dare to do now? That would scare me, but I will dare to do it. Yeah. Is it a conversation? Is it I say no to something? Is it I leave something, someone, whatever that's familiar, but it's no longer okay? Yeah, because the soul is singing otherwise. What would I dare try that I've never even entertained before, but today it's just springing up within me going, hey sister, hey girlfriend, let's go try that. Yeah.
There's a
something
potency.
different.
There's a potency in that word dare, and it's so interesting. I will be hosting a retreat later this year with the theme of dare to rest. And I've also just recently done a talk on dare, truth and promise around the core elements of well-being, and I'm thinking about Brene Brown has her book Dare to Lead. It's daring, isn't it, to step out of where you are right now and into the potential of who you are. Takes some daring.
It takes some daring, and even in the last couple of days I've done some daring things, and they've come quite out of the blue in many ways, but jeepers, I've been energized by it. Like beyond energized, because I'm going, no longer doing that, no longer tolerating that, no longer but and also in the same breath going, well, what is going to be different? And I felt, I think for us women, this is I wouldn't say an aphrodisiac, but daring has a degree of like you said, potency, and I think there's another word in there somewhere, almost like eroticism. I don't even know why that's coming out, but it is. Let's stick with it. That is fueling. It's fueling some, for me anyway, I speak for myself, fueling some energy in me, because I'm just so feeling that I'm living even more aligned to what I'm here for in this moment. I think menopause is helping it too. And I think some women will relate to that. That time in our lives where we're actually reviewing and resetting our values, or resetting what we want life to look like.
Menopause is an incredibly powerful time to really surrender into that fire of who you are as a woman, where you're perhaps no longer confined by whether it's having been a mother physically to children, or perhaps being devoted to a job or to a voluntary. It's a time where we start to question and to really prioritize ourselves. Like, this is me, and this is how I'm going to live. And I actually read a book recently about the female brain, and it talked about the completely the rewiring of the female brain during menopause. That
I call it midlife rewiring, and Christiana Northrup talks about that too. It's wonderful because we're just, sorry to interrupt, but we've thought pre-menopause, we've often as women thought about everyone else, everything else outside of ourselves. I've thought about my family, I've thought about my community, I've thought about my job, I've thought about the 100 zillion things that I've done in my life, and mostly of service, to now going, what is my soul not thinking but requiring and yearning for? And that fire, I think, and I in celebrant work we do a lot around ritual, but for me, if I do have a hot flush, for example, at the moment, I go, bring it on, girlfriend. Like, it's like, what's this fire about? What's the anger? Because it's often anger underneath the fire, I believe, for myself anyway. What's the anger, and what even is the rage, which I'm just learning to experience, to toss off, to fire up for sure, because it's giving me a good indication of what I no longer want, and I want to burn that off and burn it away. But it's also directing, it's a nice ritual to be conscious of, to go, okay, what's really potent at this time, what's really fiery, what am I no longer tolerating, and where's my soul now directing me to?
And ritual, I'd love to share that with you. My feeling is that ritual is so incredibly valuable and very necessary to the human experience. And it was always a vital part of Indigenous cultures, of, in history, ritual marked all transitions, excuse me, those liminal spaces, life changes.
Right, it's a passage, really.
I'm wondering if some of the turmoil in our modern life is because we don't have rituals to mark certain changes. Could you speak to that?
Well, I agree. I mean, in Western society, we're not great at that. I mean, for example, again, thinking of the group that I run as well, next month, I'm looking at really considering a ritual around how we were introduced into puberty and into menstruation. So I'd love to, the red tent idea with lots of red color and red objects and red dress. We'll probably even arrive in that, something that's relevant. I've got a poem in my book that I thought I'd, as part of that ritual. It's called Pipped at the Post, which is a wonderful poem where I always felt girls, had it bigger, better, and everything else as a pubescent young woman. So something around that, but also, some recollection of how we were or weren't entered or escorted into that rite of passage of becoming a woman through menstruation.
Oh, I had the wee coughs then.
You'd have the wee coughs then.
There's obviously some emotion coming up for me there.
Yeah.
Janelle, yeah, I really, I think there is so much healing in a ritual, and would love to see more of that coming through in community. And I mean, I'd like to think it's starting to happen even with the acknowledging of Matariki in New Zealand, that that there is ritual there, and how I even consider, when you look in Māori culture, the fact that in death a tangi would traditionally have gone for several days, and there would have been complete honouring of that, whereas I feel like our quick in and out funerals of maybe an hour or something doesn't really do justice to make that transition, to really deeply honour what has happened there. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do in Koya is ritual, and really starting to open up to the people, to the possibility of bringing ritual, and it doesn't need to be something that takes vast, a ritual could be actually really being present to how you make your cup of tea and how you consume it, or maybe it's that you sit outside and look at the stars for 5 minutes in the evening, or start to bring ritual into your day-to-day life so that you move from something ordinary to extraordinary.
Yeah, and it is a daily thing. I mean, one ritual that I do, for example, is called the body gratitude ritual, and what it is, or how I do it, is, having had such a background in loathing my body and some serious stuff around that, my body gratitude ritual happens in the shower. So it's something that I do daily, of course, if not twice a day. But my body gratitude is, as that water flows over me, that I'm not just in the shower. Because how often are we in the shower? We're not even in the shower. Do you know, we're in there with water over, but we're not even present to that. But this body ritual, the body gratitude ritual, is about me consciously thanking my body. It could be thanking parts of my body for what they've done, but also thanking my body as a whole for getting me through certain things. Thank you, body. Thank you, my boobs, for the nurturing I've given as I breastfed all my babies. Or thank you for thank you, body, for your amazing legs, because flipping, you've walked a bazillion miles alongside of people, helping them. Thank you, this and that. So I go around my body in parts often, but also as a whole, going, how flippin' amazing are you? And I also use that body gratitude. Water's going down into the sink, or whatever you call it, down the bottom there, going out of the drains. But it's also like, what I don't need anymore, I let go down the drain. Yeah, it's pretty simple, but it can be pretty profound. And I used to do the same. I'm just at the end of sort of my menstrual life, but as I did have my periods, each and every time, I actually, over the last 10 years, went to more pads rather than tampons, because I wanted to see that blood, and I wanted to release whatever was in my bloodline that I didn't need anymore, to powerfully go and be released. Yeah, you could do that with tampons as well. But the action or the connection of a ritual to an everyday or a reoccurring part of our lives can be awesome.
Uma Dinsmore-Tooley is an incredible yogini who really champions the feminine aspect of yoga, and she classifies women as having siddhis, which are superpowers that come specifically because we have a womb and we bleed. And she really dives into that release that comes from a bleed as a deep gift to be able to shed what we don't need, you know. So if we really do embrace that and go, wow, I'm able to let go of stuff that I don't need anymore. Yeah, it's so incredible.
But equally, it could be, and this is just a thought that's just come randomly, it equally could be for that young woman or that woman who, may be struggling with fertility or loss, through miscarriage. That body gratitude is such a powerful ritual because it can go the other way. It's what am I inviting into my life? Where do I want to nourish my body more? How do I want to see my body as this nourishing, holding child sort of vessel, if that's what they were after? It can be used in that way as well, because I think in my own experience and the many women who I've helped in a healing and coaching way in the past, disconnection to their body was a big factor. And for me, reconnecting with our bodies and actually how flippin' amazing they are, also our self-talk around them, and also our perception of how almost miraculously things can change for the better when we engage and when we honor our bodies, and that can be through ritual.
Absolutely. So Janelle, just to come towards closing, could you share with us a moment of divinity that you've experienced?
A moment of divinity. Wow. Which one? Wow. There's a long story that I'd like to tell, but I think it's too long, maybe. But it's, in essence, let me just try and summarize it for you. In my darkest moments of not feeling I was good enough in my professional capacity, walking alongside women through their hard stuff, which I did so passionately and willingly and caringly. I'm making up all these words. When I've doubted that, but I've continued to trust spirit, that any word even or any action or kind deed that I've helped or given to this woman, and been unattached to what that looks like for them, 2 years down the line, hearing or seeing them again and hearing the impact that I made, where I thought I made no impact or little impact, but their lives changed beyond recognition. Oh my God, that's a divine moment. And I think if I can relate that to people who might be listening, small acts which we may think are insignificant. It might be a wave at somebody, it might be a wink at somebody, it might be a small little thank you note. Small acts, big impact. And I believe the thread of that is trusting spirit for me, because if I didn't trust spirit, oh my God, my life would not be the same. I wouldn't be here, in fact. Trusting spirit for me, and sitting still with that knowingness that spirit is on my side and my biggest advocate, and sometimes my only advocate. That is profound.
Beautiful, beautiful. Janelle Fletcher, thank you very much for joining us, for shining your light, for being an advocate for women, for being so true in who you are. And yeah, we're grateful really, really grateful for you joining us.
Delightful. Thank you so much.
And thank you to listeners. May you go out and shine your light.